Acquitted of culpable homicide and reckless driving charges in the Randburg Magistrates Court, concluding the case that has spanned almost 5 years now. Now, for some analysis on this judgment, we're now joined by legal expert Ludwig Behrens. Hello, Ludwig. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. So, some might say that the prosecution faced an uphill battle because they have to prove that their version is the only one beyond a reasonable doubt, and this is what's played out.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
The evidence is obviously led throughout the trial. The prosecution would have looked at the docket at the beginning of the trial, decided whether there's a prima facie possibility of success in conviction, and then they would have done their investigations. I think the prosecution acted according to their mandate. Excuse me. I don't think that they overreached at all.
Yeah.
I think once the analysis of all the evidence was placed before the court made the correct judgment.
So does this vindicate the original position that the National Prosecuting Authority had, that we're not going to prosecute? I mean, it almost seems to point to that they probably thought they weren't going to get a conviction.
Well, it's a difficult call to make after the fact. Hindsight, I think, is 2020. I think it was in the interest of justice for the trial to go ahead and to be properly ventilated before a court. And like I say, right at the beginning of the, when the charge was laid or the inquest started, there was sufficient evidence placed before the prosecution to, on a prima facie basis at least, to pursue this.
All right, so let's talk about burden of proof, because I think some people might think that what this means is when you're found not guilty, it means that it's been proved beyond a reasonable doubt that you did nothing wrong. All that the court is saying is that Mr. Zuma's version could be true, and that the court failed to prove their case, and that's it, really, isn't it?
Well, I think what you need to do is you need to look at the on the evidence presented. There's not a right and a wrong version. There's a more plausible version that the court will look at, and the version put before the court by Mr. Zuma's attorneys and Mr. Helens, or Advocate Helens, was sufficient enough to prove his version beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay, so what can happen now? The NPA could appeal if it wants to?
They could. We have, we've got information, and I think it has been reported in the media that the NPA is not going to.
All right, so they're just going to leave it.
They've already made the call based on the judgment that was handed down, and the test in any appeal process would be: would a different court come to a different conclusion based on the same evidence? And I think the evidence has been ventilated fully in this trial.
So this is all happening in a criminal court. What happens now if the family decides that, hang on, we're still aggrieved? They could, I suppose, lodge a civil suit. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. That would be a completely different kettle of fish. You'll have to look at damages that they have suffered. That is normally the case if somebody would approach the RAF, for instance, the Road Accident Fund. That is how you would go about that. You can do it privately as well. It's normally done in a case where the deceased would be the sole breadwinner. There's a future loss of income that comes into play, but like I say, that's a completely different process, and it's a very long process.
Right. And so in a situation like that, so in the criminal courts, the burden of proof is with the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, does that change? Has the onus of proof shifted in any way?
Yes, it's on a balance of probability. So your burden of proof is lower than what it is in a criminal court, and the evidence in a damages claim would be completely different to the evidence that was led in this court in a criminal matter. So it is something that the family can look at, and the court will interpret the evidence presented in that case on its own merits.
All right. So, as far as Duduzane Zuma is concerned, as far as the state and him, it's a finished story. He's an innocent man. He can carry on with his life now, essentially. That's what this judgment is saying.
Absolutely. That's correct.
If the civil case does come up and damages are awarded, that's not a criminal fine, is it? It's
No.
So that wouldn't affect his ability to be a director or anything like that?
No, what it will essentially boil down to compensation.
Right.
That is where the court would say, due to the death of the person involved in this crash, certain compensation needs to be paid out. But like I say, you have these matters, you've got abundance of them in the road through the Road Accident Fund, where claims are lodged with them. And whether they pay out or not, that will maybe turn into litigation or not. There are several avenues available to the family, but it's not clear-cut that a new court will find that compensation needs to be paid by Mr. Duduzane Zuma.
All right. So on the balance of probabilities and having sort of seen the evidence that was presented, do you think that this was a fair judgment?
Yes. Yes, I think so. I think the evidence was presented well. It was presented fully by both sides, being the prosecution and the defence. And the court had enough evidence before it to properly apply its mind and come with, I feel, a very sound judgment at the end of the day.
Okay. Ludwig Behrens, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much indeed for your insights.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to take a